Mr. Chair, you're alive.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Commission's virtual public meeting on Thursday, December 2nd, 2021 at 7:02-ish p.m. right now. And we'll go ahead and go down to roll call, please. Ms. Kimberly?
Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Waldman,
Here.
Mr. Imes,
Here.
Mr. Pline,
Present.
Ms. Butler. Are we looking for her tonight?
We will be.
All right,
I think
We have four
she
now.
responded. She responded she was not going to be in attendance.
okay.
You never know.
All right, sir, we have four.
All right, thank you very much. We have quorum and we will proceed. Going down to the agenda and looking at it, we need to approve this agenda as it's listed. And the first item is postponed. Staff, is that correct? Still correct? It was when I talked to you yesterday, Jackie.
Correct.
All right,
Chair.
thank you. And so we only really have item number 2 and a little bit of the unfinished business down there. So all those in favor of the agenda as written, say aye. Or I move to approve the agenda as written. Do I have
I'll
a second?
second the motion.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right,
I
great.
want to
The
make
agenda-
sure you include the opinion of approval for Crab project.
Yeah, that's not in there, is it?
No,
The approval
I think
of- And but-
administrative, so I think it's fine.
Yeah, well, Kimberly, I believe, took it out in the agenda because it wasn't final or for some odd reason with the minutes. But yeah, it should be in there and we're going to approve it, finalize it tonight. So that'll be item, that'll be under C. We'll put that as C2.
Very good.
Okay, moving right along for the approval of minutes. Was everybody able to look at the minutes that were sent out and the second version thereof? I can stop share and move it to the minutes. Show you that if you want.
I move that we accept these as written.
Okay, do we have a second? And there were some slight changes on version 2 that was sent out for
I'll
administrative
second it.
changes.
I'll second
All right.
it.
It's been seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I abstain because I was not present.
Of course. Thank you very much. And the minutes pass as drafted on the second draft that was provided for the administrative changes. Thank you very much. Now I'll move on the agenda to the opinion. Hopefully everybody can see that opinion in order. And this is should be the latest and greatest from Chris Beard, our attorney for the Planning Commission. Let the public take a quick look at that. And then we'll go right down towards the meat and potatoes of the conditions. Those are the standards that are basic that are in all of these. We'll get through that. It's quite lengthy. And this paragraph right here, note that was a big influence by Diane, and it's in there.
Mhm.
So I just want to point that out. Off-site tree plantings is next.
I'll make a motion to approve the findings as written.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
There's been a second. Any further discussion?
No, I think those capture things well.
Yeah. And I was concerned we wouldn't get the recovering warriors part in there, and that's good. It's there. So we're
You
good.
got it, yeah. All right, no further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Me,
Mr. Wallman.
I was not present.
Thank you very
And I
much.
I want to point out, I have your approval to sign your names. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
Very
For
well.
Mr. Sale and everyone else.
Thank you.
Miss Butler, not, unless she gives you that permission via email, which I'm sure she would. Okay, stop sharing of that. Okay, back to the agenda. Is this right? Let's see. No, that's the wrong one. Stop sharing that. All right, there we go. All right, we've got the minutes done. We've got the opinion completed. It's going to each, I don't know why that's happening. And we are going down to public hearings. Item 1 for the public here, it's a major site design plan review by and preliminary subdivision application for 960 Bay Village Drive is postponed by staff. And so we have not introduced that yet. We will see that in on the next meeting, I believe. Is that correct, Jackie?
Our next meetings, by the way, are going to be the 16th, the 20, wait a minute, 16 and 20 is, and 14 is what?
Right, the December 14th, I sent you all a mark your calendar email today with a copy of the agenda, is the special presentation at the HPC meeting by the AMRP people of the city dock plan.
Mm-hmm.
And we will send you a reminder, and you will get a Zoom invite from Sherry Pin, because it's actually on the HPC agenda. And then you have your regular meeting 2 days later on December 16th. And that will be the beginning of the hearings on Providence Point.
And,
Yep.
and there'll be a discussion later tonight with Mr. Smith.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just be aware that the 16th and then the first meeting in January and the second meeting in January all three are devoted to Providence Point. So keep that in mind. And
those meetings are January 6th and January 20th. But if you have to miss one of the 3 meetings, you can watch it on video and still participate in the whole process. And until we have more planning commissioners appointed, we really need everybody to participate to
right.
really have a well-rounded discussion.
Right. So to make this simple and summary for everyone, the item 1 here for public hearings is postponed, but that item will have 3 meetings attached to its hearings. And
No.
those
Not to this one that's postponed.
no,
The one that's postponed, we haven't rescheduled that yet. It still has some issues to work out related to its APF, I believe.
All right. Yeah.
And, we will schedule it when we, at some point.
All right. Well, Thank you. That's.
We're going to try not to put anything else on the January agendas other than Providence Point.
Okay, so not to confuse anyone by talking about something that's not even on our agenda yet. Item number 1 is postponed for 960 Bay Village Drive. When have you, and you have not had any postponement date for it, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
It will be re-advertised.
And the reason for postponement is?
They still have issues related to adequate public facilities and other things that have not been finalized, as I understand it.
That's
Okay,
correct.
so that's for item 1 on our agenda, 960 Bay Village Drive. And Bob jumped ahead there for our follow-on meetings. That'll be later. We'll talk more about that later on. But let's go ahead and get to public hearings now for the major site design plan review by Primrose School. This is a public hearing that was continued from November 18th. And we had some ideas to work with the developer or the applicant. And they went off and did some work, and now they're back from November 18th to have our second meeting on this item. And it basically is Primrose School Franchising Company is the contract purchaser trying to build a little school across from Knesset Israel Synagogue, who's the property owner, for the development of an early learning and childcare facility. It's the intersection of Spot Road and Hilltop for everyone out there. So, in continuing with that, we'll go through the staff to give us a quick update, and then we'll go to the applicant to give us their updates, and then we'll go into any other public comments we have, and then commissioner debate. So please, staff, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Good evening. For the record, Thomas Smith, Chief of Current Planning, the city's planning department. This is actually a continuation of several meetings back. I believe on the November the 18th was requested a continuance from what we started or continued from November the 4th. So the applicant's traffic consultant had met with our public works department and their traffic engineers and their experts to work out some of the concerns that the commission had expressed at the November 4th meeting about U-turns and so forth. So what I sent you earlier today was a document titled Concept Plan Option E, which delineates some road improvements in Hilltop Lane, and the applicant will likely want to go through that in detail, and also a revised site plan where there were some adjustments to the shared use trail, extending it a little bit further on the site. And I also sent you a copy of the adequate public facilities revision from Director of Public Works dated November 30th, 2021, where they have reapproved the adequate public facilities based on these revisions.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir.
Where is there any discussion of the applicant paying for the changes that Department of Public Works needs to make? Is there any discussion about them paying for this?
I'm not sure I'm following you, Commissioner Wallman. I mean, I'm under the assumption that the applicant is paying for all of these road improvements.
Well, I mean,
they
as far
can
as I
correct
can
me if
tell,
I'm wrong.
well, as far as I can tell, there's basically painting, what they call geometrics, right? And then there's
Well, I
this,
also,
and then what we're going to see later is this divider, right? And is there any other?
Yes.
And there's the potential for traffic for the signal retiming. Is there anything else that DPW might have to do to accommodate this construction if it's approved?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, Mr. Wallman, Commissioner Wallman, I don't want to speak for Public Works, but it's my understanding this is the responsibility of the applicant, and they'll have to get permits to do this work, and the work has to be bonded and then inspected by Public Works. I believe Mr. Bryce is here this evening from Public Works. If we have any specific questions.
Well, he should answer this question if he's listening.
If he doesn't mind, I'd appreciate it.
And the applicant has not proposed modifications to existing signal timing, Bob, down there at the bottom.
Well, but DPW may find that with all of these crosswalks and changes that there maybe should be a change to signal timing
One would think,
to
yeah.
allow pedestrians and bicyclists to get across. I don't know. I'm just concerned that there's work to be done, and ordinarily, you know, the applicants need to pay for it. Now, I just want to know, are we clear on this?
We'll address some of that, Commissioner Waldman.
If you
Well,
look
where's
at,
Mr. Bryce?
this is Sam Bryce with Public Works.
Hi.
Last condition there, what it says is the applicant has not proposed modifications to the existing signal timing. The grading permit will require a full report to confirm the intersection's compliance with industrial standards and policies. If necessary, the applicant shall adjust. So if signal timing is necessary, then he will have to adjust the signal timing.
Okay. What if later we determine, as a result of all of this increased traffic and the changes, the addition of crosswalks and so forth, what if we find 6 months or a year from now that it needs to be retimed? Is there any way to make the applicant, responsible for that?
Well, I think he will be in, once he completes the construction of the project and he proposes that we final the project out, he'll be in a maintenance period for a year. So if what we find is that his proposed signal timing does not work, then he will have to modify that signal timing. Now, I think the thing to remember about signal timing is it's not that you have to go out and do some type of hard wiring change. It's a change within the controller, which consists of punching buttons to change the amount of time that's involved.
Okay, I understand that. I just want to make sure that we don't get stuck with things like this, in the future. I don't know what's involved in signal retiming. You do, and I just want to make sure we're protected. What about the construction that has to be done? If it's approved on Hilltop Lane, who pays for that?
He will pay for all the construction. So there's widening that's involved in his proposed changes to the intersection. There is restriping. There is a new median. He has proposed a crosswalk with crosswalk signals. So he'll be required to install all of that at his cost. That would be bonded and would be shown on the grading permit.
Okay. So a condition that says that the applicant's responsible for all proposed changes to Hilltop Lane would be sufficient?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Thank you.
Anything else, staff? You're muted, Tom, but I'll assume that's a no.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was, yes.
It's all right.
No, sir, thank you.
An obvious no. Okay, then. I'd like to hear what the applicant's got to say, unless any of the commissioners have any more questions of staff right now. We can always ask after the fact. Okay, I'm ready for the applicant to present their changes from the last design.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have here tonight Ken Schmid from Traffic Concepts and Annie Luttrell from Bay Engineering to assist with specialist questions. But I'll begin just by summarizing the changes we're proposing, and I'll share my screen in a moment. Before I do that, I just want to remind everyone what the problems we were trying to address are. It was our understanding from the various comments we heard from members of the commission and the public that the primary concern was the potential for turnarounds on residential streets to the north on Spa, where traffic was previously channeled as it exited the site, in the neighborhoods of the Gentry, West Winds, the Enclave, Spindrift, and Bayshore Landing. And then for traffic attempting to arrive at the site coming from the Forest Drive direction, that there would be no left turn in, and therefore people going past the site and trying to reapproach using the turnarounds on Chatham, Farragut, and Boxwood, which are all residential streets that would be potentially tempting for people who were passing the site rather than going farther on Forest and then using Gemini. So with that in mind, we went and made some revisions. We proposed several alternatives, and Mr. Schmid can provide details on those if you're interested. But a few of them involved left turns into the site and different lane stripings, different signal timings to allow for that. And all of the options involve a change to the exit access, the egress, such that traffic would no longer be channeled straight north on Spa, and that traffic would have the ability to continue moving westbound through that intersection at Spa and Hilltop. So after the consultants met with DPW and Traffic Concepts met, they determined that DPW was most supportive of the option which still restricts lefts into the site, but does allow traffic exiting the site to go through the intersection and continue west towards Forest. So there will no longer be all traffic channeled up Spa to the north. And so the turnarounds that we feared in the Gentry, West Winds, Enclave, Spindrift are no longer a concern with the proposed reconfiguration, which I'll pull up in just a moment. As traffic comes to enter the site, approaching generally from the west, the solutions that did not involve left turns in all hinge around providing off-site parking at the synagogue across the street, which fortunately we have access to and can come to an agreement with synagogue. So now traffic approaching from the west can turn right into the synagogue lot, and the crosswalk you're hearing about, and we've had some discussion on already, then is the means by which people will get from the synagogue parking lot over to the school. So I'm going to share my screen here, but I would also just address some of the comments that Commissioner Pline took the time to put into writing after our first hearing, and say that the applicant does recognize and agree that a street grid network would be preferable. That may take many years for us to have some sort of a reconfigured road infrastructure, but with the road infrastructure we have now, there are solutions, and we've proposed one of them, that allow this site's access to meet the criteria for site design plan review. And we think that we've sufficiently avoided the concerns for people at neighborhoods to the north and neighborhoods to the east by providing this off-site parking, being willing to construct a pedestrian crossing, and by continuing the hiker-biker trail that we had already proposed all the way to the crosswalk that exists at crossing Spa, and the new one that will cross Hilltop. So those will be, I think, substantial additions to the pedestrian and cycle network. It adds connectivity for everyone using this site, but also the public generally. And let me go ahead and share my screen to show the concept plan, which I know you all have. Actually, I'm going to start with the civil plan. And this has been made consistent with the traffic concepts plan. You'll see here that the barrier where my cursor is, if you can see my cursor, is no longer channeling all traffic exiting the site and forcing it to go up onto Spa. Instead, traffic exiting the site will be able to continue straight through the intersection by using either the middle lane or this lane farther to the left. However, traffic will not be able to cross all of those lanes and attempt to make a left onto Spa. DPW is most concerned with that potential movement by less careful drivers who would leave the site and try to cross all three lanes. So you'll also notice the traffic still can't make a left into the site, but we have proposed the off-site parking here where the synagogue is, which is just off screen to the bottom of the plan, and a new crosswalk here by which people parking at the synagogue can access Primrose. So the offsite parking, we would consent to a condition that such parking on the synagogue site be obtained by the applicant prior to the issuance of any grading permit, or perhaps better use permit at your discretion. And by our calculations, which Mr. Schmid can speak to if you have questions, if all of the vehicles which are expected to come from the west in the PM hour, which is when more vehicles will be coming from the west. So at the hour when the greatest number of vehicles will come from the west, 70% of 70 trips roughly will be coming from that direction, meaning 49, conservatively estimating 49 trips from the west. If every single one of those used the synagogue parking rather than using Gemini to reapproach from the east, then we expect that we would need approximately, Ken can check my numbers on this, we've had some back and forth, but I believe 13 spaces. However, the applicant is willing to exceed that in an abundance of caution and provide 20 spaces at the synagogue to be sure that we have enough to comfortably accommodate people at the turnover timing that it'll take to walk over to the school and then come back. So that's the basics of our proposal. I'm happy to share the other version of this plan, the traffic concepts plan, if we'd like to pull that up to the screen. But with that, I would actually just ask to call Mr. Schmid and have him walk you through some of the details about the proposed solution here that I didn't touch on as a non-traffic engineer. And then after that, I think we could just field any questions you may have. So Mr. Schmid, could you turn on your microphone?
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Schmid, I think if you could just walk the commission through the changes we're proposing here as it relates to ingress, egress, and the changes to the public rights of way, I think that would be very helpful.
Okay. Yeah, again, we got involved after the last hearing where we agreed to go back with Public Works and try to talk about different access options. We spent that time, we developed a range of access options from full access control, like was proposed before, where we had to right in and right out to the right turn lane, to a full movement access that would eliminate all the U-turn movements. And we prepared these just to give up, just to show the options from DPW's perspective. And we presented those options. We presented simulation models showing the options. And we had a couple of discussions with them in person and went over them. And Public Works opinion was that they could allow the outbound traffic to access westbound Hilltop Lane, but they were still concerned about queue along Hilltop Lane, blocking left turn movements in and out. So they just weren't willing to go any further than that kind of access. What this access does open up for us is the ability for people to go back to the east on Hilltop. The other time we had to all go up on Spa Road North and turn around into community roads or intersections and make the turn. This gives them an option to go across this, cross the intersection and go through the convenience store lot and come back to Spa to make the left turn. And does open up that option. It's still a secondary, like U-turn movement is probably not a movement that you'd like to encourage, but it's another option and people will probably do it. I do think the people coming from Forest Drive area in the evening are going to realize the situation pretty quickly. And I think the school's going to give advice to people on the different access options and which ways they could come and go the easiest. And I do think that going down Forest Drive to Gemini is probably what people are going to do that are coming from the far west. So the option with using the parking lot for the school to allow people to park over there, I think some people will probably instead of wanting to do the U-turns up and down this corridor, they may want to park in that lot and just cross the street at the new crosswalk and signals. So we tried to go in and we tried to present different options that freed up a lot of these U-turn issues, but I mean, the long and short of it is we couldn't, Public Work didn't want to take the chance of having an issue that they had to fix after we had this hearing. So they didn't want to go back a year later and have to modify some access because they should have done it in the very beginning. So, I mean, I understand that consideration. I do. I mean, they have a different job than I do, so we're okay with the access, but it's probably the best we could do to address most of the concerns of that we heard at the last hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Schmid. And
one
also,
other thing, the signal work will all be done by us at our cost. We'll design signal plans and give them to the city, and we'll install them. From a timing perspective, like Sam said, if the signal needs to be retimed, it's a thing that personally we can't do. The city maintenance workers have to go in and do this timing changes, and that would come from Sam to do them. So I don't think it's a lot of cost. There's no cost involved in that. But if they want us to put up something for that, it's just not it's something the city would do routinely.
Thank you. And Mr. Schmid, you did provide us an estimate of the cost for installing that pedestrian signal, which the applicant is accepting of, and also a preliminary estimate of the timing. And we're comfortable that the signal likely will not need to change, but understand that if it does, that we would be responsible for changing that timing. Is that right?
Yeah, one of the things the city asked us to look at is the effect of putting a crosswalk across the intersection, the timing it would take to get somebody the walk signal, the don't walk signal, get across and make it across on the light. And it will not affect the intersection's operation because the maximum green time that the Spa Road approach already gets is 40 seconds. And the actual time needed to cross the road and this width road is like, I think it was calculated 31 seconds. So, I mean, there's plenty, the timing doesn't have to be adjusted to put in this new crosswalk. I just want to point that out.
Thank you very much. And one other person who's here who the Planning Commission may want to hear from before general questions for the applicant, Mr. Schmid, and staff is Mr. Nick Dribbin has agreed that the changes proposed here do not require revisions of the TIA. They don't affect the results or the findings. So if Mr. Dribbin, if you don't mind just confirming that for the record here.
Good evening, Nick Dribbin with Lenhart Traffic. I think as everyone on the meeting is aware, we're the consultant for the city of Annapolis on this project. And I would say that, we've looked at the plans that have been provided by Mr. Schmid and Mr. Dales, in conjunction with DPW. And I think what's being provided here is a really good solution. This is closer to what we originally evaluated in the traffic impact study than I think what you've seen to date. That idea to require all traffic leaving the site to turn into the right turn lane was something that was added sort of at the last hour before the original hearing in this case. And so the traffic impact study that's been conducted generally reflects what's being shown here. And so, we've evaluated, I've spoken with Mr. Tom Smith and in concurrence that no additional traffic impact study would be required based on the proposal here.
Thank you. And just to summarize one of the issues Mr. Schmid was touching on, we did initially propose some other alternatives that allowed a left in, but the applicant is understanding that experts, including traffic engineers, in this case, Traffic Concepts and DPW, can have differing opinions about which solution is best. And here, either solution, either the offsite parking at the synagogue with a crosswalk or a left turn in would solve the problem of people not having the ability to access the site coming from the west and not being able to make a left-hand turn. While we favored the left-in movement, we are fully supportive of and accepting of any conditions for the off-site parking and the costs imposed by having to use a crosswalk instead. And we understand the DPW feels that's the safest and best way to provide access without allowing and also prevent the residential turnarounds that the commission's been concerned about. So with that, I conclude our presentation of the revisions and ask for any questions that commissioners may have.
I have a couple just minor questions about the widening. So you have to widen Hilltop just to accommodate that 2-foot wide barrier.
Yeah, we're also, remember, we're going into our site to propose the increased sidewalk width, which is now the hiker biker 8-foot sidewalk. And also then I think the 2-foot barrier, and Ken, or I think Annie may be able to speak to whether the lanes also had any widening there, and maybe the right turn lane.
The
Annie?
lane, this Ken, the lanes, the actual storage lanes at the intersection have been increased by about 75 to 100 feet. So the double through lanes are now longer, so that it'll keep the queue down less, to better and actually make the intersection operate better. We sort of did that initially to, when we were looking at a full movement access to get the queue down, but that worked. We agreed to continue to do that work, and it also accomplishes allowing the city to extend the hiker biker trail from the east to our hiker biker trail that's off site now on our site, and then extend the hiker biker trail up and provide the right ADA compliant crosswalks and handicap ramp up to cross Spa Road to the north leg of Spa Road. So yeah, it's quite a, and to accomplish all that, we have to do a little bit of widening on the south side of Hilltop Lane and overlay.
And so that widening comes out of the applicant's property.
That's right.
The church's property, or yes.
Yeah.
Church's property on the south side, and then our property on the north side. We're wide on both sides in spots.
And so do you, on the south side, does that end up narrowing that sidewalk at all, or what's the effect over there?
No, we'll remove some of that curb and gutter or sidewalk in that area and reconstruct it.
Also, the widening on the this is Annie with Bay. The widening on the synagogue side is within this City of Annapolis right of way.
Okay.
Exactly.
If you kind of slide the plan over a little, Phil, you can see that part. The widening over there, there is room to widen it and widen the sidewalk and still stay within the right of way. And the plan doesn't show it, but these utilities will all be adjusted. There's a storm drain inlet there, will be pushed behind the curb. And again, that can all stay within the right of way.
And Annie's comment there has reminded me of one other condition that the applicant would be willing to accept, and that is the addition of 2 rechargeable vehicle stations in the parking lot. So we can locate those to staff satisfaction prior to grading permit if the commission wants to impose that condition.
Have you gotten language, final language from the Board of Appeals?
Commissioner Waldman, we reached final agreement at the last Board of Appeals hearing. The terms of the condition have been agreed upon and finalized, but the actual language was to be drafted by the board's attorney, and we have not been given that language yet. But they voted and passed on the terms of that condition, which I could summarize for you and proffer that they made the cessation of the use a requirement rather than a permissive may. So the use shall cease if the applicant does not address any queuing problems that arise. And queuing was defined as the blocking of entrance to the lot caused by queuing in the lot for a period of time equal to the signal cycle. So I think that the Board of Appeals should have that. I understand they're close to finished with the final language. And I'm sure they could provide that into the public record prior to your next hearing on this on the 16th.
When is their next hearing, or when are they due to vote on their findings?
I don't believe they need to vote again. I think they voted already on what the terms will be, and they just have to provide the final. Mr. Smith can speak to this because he's been talking to the Chairman Gallagher, about the final language, but I think they've already had the vote they need to have.
That's correct.
Okay. I don't want to get into the language of it here. I'd much rather see what the Board of Appeals, has come up with, to see if, what it is. Okay, so we don't know what that is. We don't have it yet. All right.
Commissioner Waldman, if you had a moment to watch that portion of the Board of Appeals last hearing, they did a screen share. And so if you watch the video, they actually have the marked up proposed changes that we accepted.
Mr. Dales, it's not something I choose to do in my leisure time.
Understood.
I actually leave it up to you to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. In this case, we are not drafting the conditions, so I'm just sort of waiting to see what.
I know, I understand. We're in a waiting game on this, but okay, it's something we're gonna, we'll see what comes up. So what is in the hopper with this off-street parking at Knesset Israel? What's been proposed?
The proposal is 20 spaces to well exceed any potential need for the maximum number of cars coming from the west. And so we would just have.
How long is that agreement to last?
That agreement should, we'll have that for the use of the special exception or site plan here. So if you chose to write the condition that we'd have to, secure that parking, and show proof of it each year to maintain the use of the the site design plan, then you could write the condition that way.
Well, I'm of two minds. One of them is, yes, I think that if it's necessary, I think that we need to nail it down so that it doesn't just disappear in the future. Who knows what's going to happen with the synagogue? But on the other hand, if it's not necessary, I don't want to see whoever is running the school have to do something that they don't have, really shouldn't have to do. So
Commissioner Waldman, that's a thoughtful, that's a good thought, given that the intersection is going to be reconstructed or redesigned in 3 years. And so perhaps at that time, that would be a moment where off-site parking would become unnecessary. And I would offer to you that the attorney for the school, whether that's me or someone else at the time, would come back and seek a modification of that condition.
Okay. All right. Okay. I don't think I have any further questions. Mr. Schmid.
Yes.
Still with us?
Yes, I am.
So what you think is going to happen is that people are going to come out of this and they're going to go over to the convenience store parking lot and make a U-turn? Or come in and go back out Spa Road, or do something? They're going to use the convenience store parking lot?
I think some will.
You think so?
Yeah. Okay. It's probably short, especially off peak, not dead peak hour.
How do you feel about placing onto some other property owner conditions created by this property owner?
Well, I'm just saying it's people's habits. They're going to do it. I'm not sure if it's done a lot of places around this area, and I'm sure they can stop it. And I'm not sure we're not saying that's the only thing they can do to get around now. Okay. But I think some people will choose to do that and not be forced to turn around on the Spot Road communities.
And then you adverted to something about what DPW wanted, and this is the best way we could meet that. What, I didn't understand what you were talking about. Something.
Well, my theory in traffic engineering, I've probably testified to this before, is that the least control is the best control, meaning you allow things to happen and occur until there's a problem with it, and then you address that problem. So in my mind, this is a perfect example of where we could allow the full movement access. We could design it so that if there's a problem with a left turn out or a left turn in, we could within whenever we get the material, put flex posts up there on a temporary basis. Would probably be up in less than a week. And then we would go back and put the permanent concrete barrier in, as plans would get approved.
So wait a minute, let's get concrete here. I mean, I don't, pardon the pun, but what you're saying is you were proposing to allow people to come out of this parking lot and go in any one of the three possible directions, right turn, straight ahead, or left turn, and then see what it's like?
Well, it's not going to, there's no straight ahead. So I'd allow the left turn in and I'll allow the left turn out, changing the striping out there.
Mr. Schmid, I think Mr. Waldman is asking about the exiting the site and then being able to turn left onto Spa to get to Forest.
You thought though that they should allow, you should just allow anything to happen here and see how it works out?
Well, our analysis has shown it will work, especially with the improvements we're doing and lessening the queue. Our maximum queue during the peak times went back just to that intersection. So when the traffic dissipates out and that queue goes away and the signal timing of the light works out, they'll make left turns into a two-way left turn lane. They'll cross the eastbound traffic first into the two-way left turn lane, and then they'll stage there to go and blend in traffic in the eastbound direction. And that's what the two-way left turn lanes and multi-lane highways around the county. I'm not sure how many two-lane or center turn lanes are in Annapolis, but that's what they're used for. And the law was codified that allowed that to be used in the vehicle code.
Okay, I don't know that I followed that, but thank you.
I can probably clarify a little bit. I think what Traffic Concepts had proposed, and this is sort of a moot point because the commission could make comments and suggest that DPW consider alternative solutions here, but DPW has jurisdiction and was very firm that they didn't want to see left turns into the site. The way that the Traffic Concepts had proposed it working was that there would be, as traffic came from the west across the intersection, there would be a center lane for turns, and you could make a left into the site from that center lane. So coming through the intersection, there would be it would be a continued lane from the traffic coming from the west, but then there would be a shared turn lane that people could use to turn left into the site rather than having to turn right into the church or the synagogue parking lot, or to have chosen not to go this way and go down to Gemini. I believe
we had proposed options that it was full movement, and then the next one down was an option where we allowed the left turns in but not left turns out with some geometric changes and such. And then one option was the one that we're at now, and another option was to create a bypass lane for left turns in.
Yeah, the summary is that we had several other options that we preferred, but we were accepting of any of the options we put forward, and DPW did not accept the other options we're talking about now. And this was the only option that DPW felt was acceptable.
Well, I can see why people hire consultants, because they see it through through the eyes of their clients. We are where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one question about what's the expected sort of peak time for the school, both AM, PM? We expect most of the action to happen.
Mr. Driven might be able to remember that from the traffic impact analysis. It's roughly, as I recall, either 3 or 4 in the afternoon for peak time, and then in the morning, I believe it was 8 a.m. hour. Mr. Driven, can you confirm that?
So when we look at it, as far as the traffic study, we look at the peak hours of the roadway, and we assume that the worst traffic for the development will correspond with the worst, heaviest hour of traffic for the site. So it's sort of a worst case scenario. We're not, I think there's a good chance that, a good bit of the traffic may occur, that not coinciding with the peaks of the adjacent street. I don't have those specific hours, but I can tell you that from the traffic study, the counts that we conducted, the morning peak hour occurred from 7:45 to 8:45 a.m. And the evening peak hour was from 4 to 5 p.m.
And that being very conservative, maybe Mr. Taylor could provide some information about when the actual peak hour for the use itself typically is for a Primrose school. I would suspect it's earlier than the evening rush hour time that Mr. Driven just noted. Mr. Taylor, are you available?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry, I gotta get my video going here. I apologize. Can you folks hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay. I've got some technical difficulties here. Our typical pickup and drop off time in the mornings are 6:30 to 9:30, and in the evenings around 3:30 to 6:30. And hours of operation are 6:30 to 6:30, 5 days a week with no weekends. So that's really what, call it a peak hour. It's a pretty even distribution, and that's what
even distribution.
You have some people coming earlier who get out of work earlier. You have some people coming later who are either going to work later or getting out of work later. So we really don't have a significant peak. And this is over 450 plus schools that we study in these things for each of these presentations. So we have pretty good data across the board that would tell us that. So I hope that answers the board's question.
Yep.
Alex, is your question answered?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
All right, I can go next. And if you could stop sharing, please, so I can share myself and get better essay. Situational awareness. Okay, I will share. There we go. All right. So obviously, they just showed us this up top, the big changes. Let me zoom it back out. And for clarity in the public, what is this right here?
Mr. Schmid, do you want to explain that's a barrier?
Sorry, that's the utility trench for the sewer connection. So that's just, they're going to dig it out to connect to the sewer and then have to repave it.
Okay. Thank you. So there is no barrier there if anybody's thinking that in your drawing, correct? Correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. And the crosswalk that the applicant would build is roughly where here?
No, it's shown there, Chairman Sale. It's the one that just to the left of your cursor there.
Right here?
One. Yes.
Building this. So people would drive, and what's not on this diagram, which would be nice, is the parking lot to Knesset Israel. If you're going to use that as part of yours, it'd be nice to reference that so you could actually see it all in one spot. But their parking lot entrance is roughly here, correct?
It's a little bit farther down, which is why you can't see it. When we resubmit the site plans, we can pull the plan down and show it.
My point is, it's a lot further down. It's whereas your crosswalk is here, right? The crosswalk is there. It's a crossover. So if people are going to park, they would come all the way down here, then they would walk all the way back up here to cross, and then down into the parking lot or access right here. Vice having a crosswalk maybe down here somewhere.
Yeah, that was not an option. DPW does not allow mid-block crossings.
Gotcha. Good to know. Thank you. So that's the reason for that. So people, you're saying, may park and then walk with their child all the way up to Hilltop Lane and then cross over here to the school. Vice. I mean, if I'm driving, I'm just going to say it's me. I'm not going to pull in there. I'm going to go here and do the U-turn in the neighborhood and then go into that lot. It would save me time and effort and not having to walk with my kid along Hilltop where people fly by. But that's just me. I'm going to say.
Chairman Sale, our traffic consultant.
No, I'm still talking. Let me, because this will be faster if I talk. So that's the way I view that, going and parking in the lot and then coming up here and crossing for people. Now I'm going to go back, stop share and go back to the drawing. And I'm talking to other commissioners here at the same time. So feel free to chime in if you want. So you go back here and you make this crossing. Now, this crossing here, what type of light fixtures and amenities will this crosswalk have? Can you elaborate on that?
Answer that.
Crosswalk will be ADA compliant, so it'll have countdown signal heads. It'll have beepers and for blind and deaf. So it'll be fully ADA compliant with signal heads and push buttons and
lights and okay. And
yeah.
what exists there now for that crosswalk?
There is not a crosswalk there.
Okay, so clearly the crosswalk in and of itself, if people park at Knesset Israel and walk down here and cross, that would institute a delay to the traffic. Has that been factored into the traffic analysis and the numbers we have?
Chairman Sale, that's not true. It would not necessitate a delay.
You're saying people crossing at a crosswalk, press a button, and that wouldn't create a delay to any traffic?
I think Mr. Schmid can elaborate.
Well, it won't require any more green time or any more adjustment of the green time taken away from other approaches. No, the green time's already set up for this crosswalk. When somebody presses the button and they cross and somebody's making a left turn coming the other way, they're going to have to yield to them.
Okay, so exactly. So to say that people utilizing a lit crosswalk and pressing the button has zero effect on traffic and adds zero delay is not true. So it does add some delay. Maybe not as much as some people.
Tiny bit.
Who's that talking?
Me, a tiny bit of delay could occur.
I couldn't hear really what that was. Somebody said tiny delay. Okay.
You could assume there's a tiny bit of delay added with the crosswalk, but that's typical of any intersection where you have crosswalks.
Correct, but it does add delay. So if we're using Knesset Israel and coming up here, it would be, but I don't think a lot of people would use that anyway. I think they would go down and turn in the neighborhoods. Some may. Okay. And if we back out now, if I go up to the, if I back out of here.
Well, Chairman Sale, you asked me to wait on the issue of whether people would use the lot or not. And I wanted to make a response to that if it's a question to us, we would instruct the parents that if they're coming from the west, they are to park there. And then our traffic consultant and I believe the city's consultant as well think that most people who did not want to park in the synagogue lot would actually not choose to do the turnarounds on Chatham, Farragut, or Boxwood, but rather would choose to go farther down Forest and use Gemini to approach the site from the right and be able to park.
Either way, they got to go down and turn around somewhere. So that works. Thank you. Okay, now getting back to clarity on this. So in the previous design, the concrete barrier was over all the way to this lane right here. We're just concrete barriered off the right turn lane, correct? And now in this design, you moved it over 2 lanes, so we encompass the straight lanes, but not the left turning lane, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When people are coming from the east, and I don't know what's going to be on here, probably a sign or something. The road splits and opens up here. It goes from 1 lane to 4 lanes effectively. And right here, I believe that's still a middle turning lane, and I'll stop the share and go out to the existing. And I want to see what we're doing with that. Zooming down, your 1 lane becomes effectively 4. And that barrier is probably going to be roughly around here. I'm worried about people running into that barrier. You know, we're talking about people not being great drivers for every other turn and in and out. What's the likelihood of them running into that barrier, and what's going to stop them from doing that? Is there a big sign there?
There will be signs posted at either end. They're 18-inch wide, specially made for narrow medians that show the median. And
how wide is that? How wide is that concrete median?
The median's 2 feet wide, and the signs are 18 inches wide.
So 2 feet wide, and the sign is 18 inches wide. So people coming.
Is it like the sign that you see at the at Poplar and Glen that everybody hits all the time? Is it like that one where the trail is? Or is
It's
it?
a sign that has a median, a black median and an arrow that shows it going around the median.
Is there going to be anything? I'm looking behind David Iams right now in his background picture. There's like about a 2.5 foot, 3 foot wide median right there. Is it going to be kind of like that? I mean, I'd love to see a picture if you guys have it in your design plan of it. I'm sure it's in the other design plan I already had, but it's not like a really nice picture. I'm worried about people hitting that coming up there in the night or the day. But I mean, you know, we got to expect people to drive sensibly. So that'll be there. That's a little bit of a worry for the people, is that big concrete barrier. I'm wondering if the concrete barrier is going to actually end up making more problems than it actually corrects. And in the previous meeting, I was really hoping you guys would move that barrier all the way over so people could come out of here when the opportunity arose to make a left turn. Because what I see, and I'm going to zoom out on the Google Earth here, is you're going to have people coming out and they're able to go straight now. And that's a big improvement. They don't have to go right to make a U-turn. They can go straight, but straight buys them nothing at Hilltop. All of this right here goes right. You can't make a left onto Forest Drive. So if people are going to go straight, we've talked about it, they have to make a U-turn in the Pantry Market to come south on Spa. So they're going to have to come in and go down like that. So you're making a through there and coming down. It's almost like we're making more trips and more risks. You're adding risk, where there's a risk going in the parking lot now, there's a risk in merging into this traffic. You add up all that risk. Are we really saving risk overall, or are we causing more? If we just didn't have the concrete barrier down here and let people make that option of possibly turn left on Spa when traffic clears, because I use this intersection daily and the traffic clears. There's times when it could be utilized, and I still think that
Mr.
would
Chairman,
be nice.
I just want to
Hold on, I'm not done. Let me just finish and things will go faster. So for my fellow commissioners, you're going down Hilltop, you can't make a left on the Forest Drive, and you got to go out there if you want to come south. So everything to the south and the southeast is still underserved by traffic flow, in my opinion. So you got to come out with your new design. You got to go through Pantry, you're saying, and then come south on Spa Road. You can't come out
some
here.
people will do that.
And that's if I was going to come out of the property and I wanted to go south on Spa, that's how I would have to do it. Or I go all the way to Forest Drive, and then I go up Forest Drive and make a U-turn somewhere up here, you know, at the light is where I would have to go. So it's adding trips elsewhere. I wonder if we're not adding risk and adding trips elsewhere that we're not accounting for, when it could be just easier removing the concrete barrier, in my opinion, and not put it up to later. So I'm gonna, for clarity on my own part, is the concrete barrier going up on that lane to divide the lanes with the initial development of the property, or are we gonna wait till later to see if it needs to be put there? Is that gonna happen or not?
Mr. Chairman, the reason I was trying to interject is that some of these questions are being directed to the applicant, and you're saying you wished we had come back with that. These are decisions that are in DPW's jurisdiction, and these are at DPW's insistence that barrier remain and prevent people from getting into that left lane. So what I would suggest or ask is if Mr. Bryce could respond to some of those thoughts. And I would also note that I think people looking to go south, point south on Forest would use the Cherry Lane left turn and turn around there.
DPW, can we talk about that some more, DPW? Are we really? I mean, I really would think that lane divider might cause more problems than it's really saving.
But before you do that, Ben, I got to tell you, I'm in agreement with you about that parking lot at Knesset Ezra. I don't see anybody using it. I don't see why they would that far away. I could see them parking at the Pantry and walking their kid over before they would do that. So,
yeah.
you know, yeah. I just don't see that as a viable option at all. That makes any sense. I see putting it in there just to say we did it, but I don't see that anybody would use it. I think they would turn around, they park on Chatham Lane or turn around on Chatham Lane. I don't see anybody going all the way down to Gemini either. But
and I'll ask, and also want to hear DPW on the idea. Was it ever talked about Knesset Israel giving up enough right here to make another lane traveling eastbound, so then you could have a turning lane way at the end of the property down here? If they gave up just a little bit of this property and added another eastbound lane, then you could make one of these lanes a turning lane down here, and then we're all good. Everything's would be much better, maybe. Was that ever talked about, DPW, or no, not an option?
Chairman Sales, I don't know. I did not attend some of the, I attended the first meeting we had on this. I was on vacation for that, as well as the following meetings. However, I do not believe that was ever discussed. I would ask Ken, was that discussed at some point?
It was not discussed. I can answer that. I've been involved in the project from the beginning. It was never proposed to us or suggested to us that that was a need. We thought that we were complying with all the DPW requirements and requests. So that being raised by the commission that we don't have any opportunity or right to engage with until this point, there's no opportunity to know that that was sought. It has never been proposed or suggested.
You couldn't have a work session with us?
We can have a work session.
Okay. All right. Well, DPW. Okay. It's maybe that's the first time anybody's thought of it, but or maybe they didn't want to do that, but because that would involve giving up some property here to make another lane. So you could then make a turning lane that would turn in down here at the end of traffic, and everything would seem kosher at that point to me.
But I think you run into you've still got under that scenario. There's an awful lot of traffic that is occurring at that intersection, and if you do have a left turn lane that you put in by adding an additional lane to the south, you've still got this traffic crossing 4 lanes of traffic. And as you start to have vehicles trying to cross 4 lanes of traffic and 4 lanes of traffic where the traffic is transitioning, you create an increasingly unsafe condition. You know, you think of pulling out of someplace like Bowen's to make a left-hand turn.
Yeah, that's a good example.
You know, it becomes very, very difficult. And that's, you know, Bowen's is actually a really good example, because what you've got at Bowen's is you've got 2 through lanes, then a double left going up onto 665. And then just to get over to to your through lane. So it becomes increasingly difficult, and that's one of Public Works' concerns. You know, you're not crossing 1 lane or 2 lanes. You're up to 4 lanes, and it's 4 lanes that are transitioning. You know, some people want to go right, 2 lanes want to go through, 1 lane wants to go left.
On the last meeting, we had a traffic engineer actually somewhat disagree with that, saying it's really 1 lane they're crossing due to it being down here, because it's a separating 1 lane, and that 1 lane doesn't really start till later. So the traffic engineer that we have, was it Nick? I believe.
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
wasn't that what we talked about the last meeting? It's really 1 lane for the assessment.
I will state for the record that my the way we conducted the traffic impact study was as though you could turn right out of the site and access any of the lanes at the Hilltop and Spa intersection. So you could turn left, you could go through, you could turn right, and under that scenario, the intersection met all requirements for adequate public facilities. And I am strongly of the opinion that there is not a need to restrict movements out of this site. I believe, to the point you just made, Chairman Sale, I believe that vehicles approaching from the east, heading westbound on Hilltop, for somebody leaving the site, while there are technically 4 lanes in front of the site access, those vehicles are not crossing. They don't have to interact or review 4 different lanes of cars coming at them. They're looking at a single stream of vehicles coming to them. So the movement out of there is exactly where your arrow is looking at a single movement out. And I, from my professional opinion, don't see the need to restrict that movement.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. And I believe, and that sounds exactly what I remember from the last meeting. But DPW, our own city, is thinking that's not the case. Is there any way we could sway with that on the city, from the city perspective, and maybe not put up that barrier, but then have it as a condition, as if it's a problem later put it in? I remember there was some talk about safety and maybe liability, but is there any way we really could do that and not do it until a later time after we get a follow-on assessment? And if we don't do it, then the developer gets the money back. You know, could that be something we could look at for Department of Public Works?
That would not be my favorite solution. I've seen similar proposals in the past, and the one that immediately comes to mind is the one associated with the Lowe's Access Road and a potential traffic signal there. And because traffic did not develop, and because the planned improvements that went along with and I think it was the Omni Hotel originally, they did not occur as rapidly as had been anticipated. That period of time expired, and then they had problems. So that would not be my favorite solution.
Yeah, okay. And the last thing I have for DPW is, can we go over again what exactly is planned on the redesign of this intersection in 3 years? And would it cure any of the issues and the barrier going away? Could you throw all that in there real quick?
Yeah, it's the redesign of the intersection is not necessarily a geometric redesign. The intersection and what we have with most of our traffic signals in town is the traffic signals are aging out, the equipment's aging out, and it needs to be replaced. And span wires are aging out, and so the redesign of that intersection is much more an equipment redesign and replacement versus a geometric redesign.
Okay, and as far as pedestrian walkways and access throughout that intersection, is that going to be part of the design other than the equipment, or is there no real new concrete sidewalks and things like that?
There's my recollection is while we have not started the design on that, there's currently no plan to reinstall or install new sidewalks. And I do not remember, because many of our intersections, we have replaced the handicap ramp accessibility to them.
Okay.
But if those ramps do not meet our current standard, then or the current ADA standard, those ramps would be replaced. I think one of the things many people don't realize, I've been putting ramps in since about 1977, and up until probably 2015, the ramps that we had been installing do not meet the current standard. The handicap ramps have been a moving target for years.
That stinks. I feel for you. Have we been sued by the ADA yet?
No, because when we do improvements to intersections, we do upgrade the ramps. That's why when you see a resurfacing project, part of the resurfacing project is the upgrading of the handicap ramps.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That was very handy to know that there's no real geometry changing here, but there is a lot of mechanical wires and machinery changing there for that intersection. Okay, back to Nick real quick. Nick, on the entrance down here, the traffic that's coming eastbound on Hilltop, and you had mentioned before the one lane here. For the traffic coming eastbound, did you find it problematic or not a problem for traffic eastbound to turn a left into the parking lot?
Good question, Chairman. So when we initially reviewed this, the site plan did not call for a left turn in. So our traffic study did not evaluate a left turn in. It did evaluate the right turns out, as I've described, as well as right turns in. But there was no left turn into the site that was evaluated as part of our study.
Okay, fair enough. And I got a kind of theme in my mind of designing to a problem that we may or may not have, you know what I mean? And putting more onus on the developer to spend more money on something that maybe shouldn't have to be there, and we can make it better for everyone and make this design go forward and be approved, you know? That's kind of the thought that I have behind this. But So for the commissioners, that's what I'm thinking, is that lane divider there could be more of a risk addition and more of a hindrance to having proper or better traffic flow than what we're currently going to have. I mean, that's really the one thing that gets me. And I got to give kudos to development for the biker trail and the sidewalks. Fantastic job on those coming around the property and extension. The crosswalk at Hilltop, that's another great addition because a lot of people would like to use that. I see people all the time running across Hilltop for their life. And that's going to be a fantastic addition. So, the development brings some additions we want to see and we want as a planning commission that are in accordance with our comprehensive plan. But at the same time, it's almost like as a city, we're limiting them and costing them more money to do something that I am not really bought into being necessary yet. So, but there's a lot of professionals here. There's some professionals saying, hey, that's necessary. And there's others saying it's not. So that's where I'm at, commissioners. Any other questions by the commissioners of the, I'll stop the share of that for the applicant before we proceed on.
Yeah, Ben, you've opened up a very interesting avenue here.
And I can bring back a map if you want, Bob. Let me know what you want. I can display anything.
And also, pardon that pun. Where's Mr. Grban? Nick Grban. So Nick, Mr. Grban, if there were no barricade there in an experimental situation, how long do you think it would take to find out whether it's working or not? What would be 3 months, 9 months, 6 months?
It's a good question. I mean, so there are different ways of determining whether it's working. I think one thing that we commonly do as traffic engineers is conduct field observations. So, over the course of my 15 years, I've gone to probably thousands of intersections and reviewed them for safety and operations. And, as a traffic engineer, you can get a feel pretty quickly for, are there near misses? Do you see vehicles having conflicts that shouldn't be happening? So I think a qualified traffic engineer, within a month or two of the site being open, or even, within the first couple of weeks, there's some break-in time where, traffic is sort of figuring out how they're going to get there and what the normal pattern should be and what the best way to approach the site is. But once those things shake out, within a month or two, I think a qualified traffic engineer could go out and make observations and determine whether, those types of issues are observed. In terms of sort of a more formal, crash data analysis, I mean, crash data typically lags, by about a year or so. So, to get sort of a formal evaluation from a crash standpoint and whether we've seen an uptick in crashes or things like that could take, probably 1 to 3 years before you have a reasonable amount of data to look at that. But I think, you could kind of combine the two and do an initial observation from a traffic engineer and, the city's DPW staff, to see whether those types of issues are occurring, and then follow that up with the kind of more formal official review of data. There's certainly a number of ways to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Mr. Bryce.
Yes.
Would you consider an experimental period where we take a look at this? Money is bonded in case there needs to be put up a concrete barrier, and perhaps the applicant could make a gamble here that by paying for the traffic analysis, the observations in say 2, 3, 4 months, he may not have to put up a concrete barrier. It'd be cheaper to have the observations than it would be to have the barrier. And would you be willing to try this for a short while? Knowing that if it's not working, crossing the 4 lanes or 3, however you count them, is not working, that you've got the money in pocket to put up the concrete?
I believe we have the solution that's been worked out, I think, is a good solution. I do not feel or believe that, particularly given the group
that is going to be using this facility, mainly parents with their young children. I want to increase the risk by opening it up and then going, oh, let's see how well this works. I look around our extended community and I see an awful lot of barriers that are going up to prevent movements that are hazardous. So that would not be a solution that I would be supportive of.
Even though you've got two traffic engineers who disagree?
Even though by the time this is built, I'll be retired. You know, we're dealing with children, young children who are going to be in cars, and the crossing of that many lanes and that much heavy traffic, particularly during these peak hours, are of a concern to the public works staff. You know, we talk about this, and I think, and I go back to my comment about Bowens. I pull out of Bowens, I turn right, go down to Admiral Cochrane, and either turn around somewhere there or wander my way back to another traffic signal. You know, left turns on high volume intersections, particularly where you see intersections, particularly where you're seeing access at intersections this close, are concerns.
Well, I'm familiar with Bowens too, and I've definitely had the problems to getting out of their lot myself.
Yep.
And I've also done what you've done, but I don't think that these intersections are comparable. I mean, you've got Reaver Road and you've got 3 lanes going north. You've got 2 lanes coming south off of some of it, an exit ramp off of an expressway. I mean, I just don't find them to be comparable. You know,
well, let me bring up another one.
The speeds involved are quite different, but okay. I'm in favor of experiments.
I mean, just by way of another example, in West Annapolis at Melvin and Forbes, which, you know, used to be when Rao Boulevard was not as wide as it is, you had basically a full block there. And what you end up with is people come off Rao Boulevard and they try to make these left turns on that short block right there. So they turn off Rao Boulevard and they try to make a left in there, and there's cars stacking up to go either right or left or straight. And you have people coming out of Forbes from Grawls trying to turn left on Melvin, and it's a mess. It's a complete mess. And, you know, I think that's a more simplified version of what's happening at Hill. What would happen, you know, if you allowed people to make all these left turns in and out? I think it's the same thing. And, you know, I walk through there all the time, and I see people almost get T-boned, or they pull halfway out into the intersection, get stuck, and then almost get T-boned by somebody turning, or, you know, that's what I would worry about, is somebody taking a left out of the parking lot, or making a left, you know, into the parking lot, and they get halfway through and they get stuck because, you know, I mean, Hilltop, basically the stacking for the light at Hilltop, at Spa Road on Hilltop, at those hours, it's, you know, all the lanes are full.
Yeah.
And so you're gonna have people stopping in the middle of the street because they want to make a left turn. And, you know, and they're just oblivious, realizing that they're going to get whacked from behind, or it's just a mess.
I think you've brought up an interesting intersection, because I actually posted the no left turn signs there. And one of those no left turn signs was an 8-foot by 4-foot sign.
Well,
I don't know
nobody,
if you
nobody
all-
reads, nobody reads or pays attention to
Right.
those signs.
And
They're meaningless.
18 months after I posted that sign, one of the attorneys in that block got a ticket for turning left. And he called me up and said, "When did you post that brand new sign?" I said, 18 months ago. And you hit it right on the head. You know, you many cases you have to put some type of positive reinforcement to prevent bad traffic habits.
Yeah, like that guy in that white truck right there. You know, usually there's a lot more cars there, and you know they get stuck, or they get whacked. It's just, you know, but basically, ultimately, the problem is that you have ingress and egress too close to an intersection, and you know whether it's in this case where the distance to Robb Boulevard got shortened as Robb Boulevard kept getting widened, or in the case of Hilltop where you know you're creating new, you know, a new curb cut close to the intersection. You know, it's the same thing, and in this case, you know, you didn't really have much to, you know, the fact that the state kept widening Robb Boulevard made this happen. You know, in this case, at Hilltop, you know, we're watching this happen, and you know, are we going to just watch it happen?
I'm not sure that the state widened Robb Boulevard. I think
or whatever. I mean, this
yeah,
block.
my recollection is that since I've been here, that's been 2 lanes with a left turn lane and a shoulder, because the concrete curbing that's in there was curbing that replaced some asphalt curbing they had there.
Well, I mean, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I mean, it
But
is
that's a
but-
tough intersection
Yeah.
to maneuver in any event.
And basically, so ultimately my point is, we are making, you know, with allowing all the left turns in and out of this particular development, we are creating that intersection here.
Mr. Plant, can I just suggest to you that the difference is also that that's an actual public street that you're referencing in West Annapolis. Here, we're just creating access to one site so that it can have vehicular access for whatever that use may be. And perhaps the road network is not perfect, and it would be better to have it farther away from the intersection, but we're locating the access as far as possible, and it isn't as close as the example you're referencing. And that example, I think, is an intensified version, a condensed version where all the problems are exacerbated, and it's not quite the same here. And I think, you know, trying to create a very perfect, more suburban access solution may not be possible. That certainly shouldn't prevent the applicant from meeting the criteria for site design plan review. So I think what we've come up with here is a solution that takes into account DPW's concerns about limiting turning movements, and also it addresses the concerns that you had in a very substantial way to deal with traffic that had been forced to go up SPA and make turnarounds, and gives those people much greater access to the road network, which is a public road network, to find those solutions to those problems. And at some point, we can't consider that people are always going to break every single rule or be so lacks so much reasonability that they'll be running into the barriers. You know, there has to be, and we have to believe that the rules that we put in place would be enforced. One other suggestion I did have, and I didn't get to talk with Mr. Bryce about it, was perhaps putting up local traffic only signs on Chatham, Farragut, and Boxwood if DPW would be amenable to that. But I think, you know, what we're doing here is significantly addressing concerns you raised, honoring DPW's jurisdiction and thoughts about what they believe is safest. And we're amenable to any of those solutions here.
Would electric lights at the end of that barricade be helpful? Some sort of electric warning light?
I believe, and I'm going to respond, not being asked to respond. You know, what Ken has spoken about are the same types of signs we see consistently at the end of these medians like this. Whether it's a small median like we see on Riva Road, or it is a major median like we see on Bladen Street. You have a standard object marker there that with the arrow that shows which way you go around the median, or that shows you it's a split median, and that is what the drivers are used to seeing, and that is what you are hopeful that they will follow. They are generally high intensity materials that you can see at night significant distances away. To put some type of abnormal, what I'm going to call abnormal indications there, only serves to confuse drivers.
So the answer is no.
Correct.
Thank you.
Nick, based on your traffic study, did your traffic study have time to accommodate the new design yet and change thoughts and numbers?
The traffic study did not, but I believe that the new design is more consistent with what we originally analyzed, which included full access there.
Yeah, because you're getting more lanes of traffic back into your flow.
Right. So it's not identical, but we have spoken with Tom Smith and DPW, and I think there's concurrence that an updated traffic study wouldn't necessarily be required, since it is fairly consistent with what was originally conducted.
Now, in your traffic study, does that traffic study give out a safety analysis number or a rating type of assessment, with or without? Does your traffic study also include a rating of safety? So if you change something to the design, you get a new safety number or a new safety assessment. Is that included?
So there's no, with operations, it's very cut and dried in terms of, what the metrics are for evaluation. We have level of service, and everybody, I think, has sort of an intuitive understanding of that because of the fact that it's, similar to school grades. In terms of safety, it's more of a conceptual evaluation and, professional opinion and experience. We do collect traffic. We do collect crash data, and that's crash data based on existing patterns, and we sort of look at that in terms of how that might be affected by what's occurring. And I'm just looking back at our report to see if there's anything notable at this intersection.
Okay. With the concrete barrier being there versus not being there, what's the level of service there or not there? Better or worse?
Right. So there's no level of service for safety. Sorry if I wasn't clear on that. The safety is more
just level of service.
Right. So the level of service at that intersection at Spa and Hilltop,
without a concrete barrier, is going to be better than with a concrete barrier, correct? Or will it not be?
I think it's less of, I think the intersection would operate similarly because there's the same number of cars are passing through there, the same number of vehicles from the site, additional vehicles. I think where you would see effects is in the broader network. I think, as it was pointed out earlier, if you're forced to go straight on Hilltop as opposed to being able to turn left onto Spa, certainly some of the local, intersections right there. But also, if you're able to turn left onto Spa, you can get down and you can access points to the south and east of here much more effectively than if you aren't able to make that movement. So I think Hilltop and Spa would operate similarly. It's, Forest and Hilltop, Spa and Forest, and some of the other, sort of local streets and driveways to the west of here that might see, more operational impacts.
And in your professional opinion, I believe you stated no concrete barrier was done with the assessment. And would you also recommend no concrete barrier?
That is my recommendation. I don't see a safety need for the concrete barrier. Certainly respect Mr. Bryce's opinion and his local knowledge. But based on my traffic engineering experience, I don't see the need for that. And the operational, driveway evaluation that we conducted as part of the study showed that everything operated effectively. So that is my opinion.
Okay. And
Commissioners,
you're paid for by the city, or do you work for the city?
Yes, sir. We are the consultants for the city of Annapolis.
Consultants for the city, hired by planning and zoning, right? Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Commissioners, there's been some discussion about testing of the movements before the barrier is constructed. And if DPW is not willing to entertain that approach, perhaps we could tackle that from the other way and create a condition for the applicant to do a study to pay for a study 2 years out or a year out, or 6 months out on the functioning of the intersection and how the lanes are used with the barrier, and then present those findings to the Commission and Department of Public Works so they could reconsider the need for the barrier based on that study.
I wouldn't even see that barrier being taken down once it's up. Once it's up, it's going to stay. You know what I mean? It's like,
Well, I believe that they can be taken down without too much trouble, is my understanding. There would need to be some impetus for that to happen.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. Other questions for the design or anything from the commissioners at the moment? We can go into, is there any public testimony or anyone waiting online to testify? I don't believe there is. Julian or the gang? Tom? Brooks, there's Brooks Schandelmeyer. Yes, we've delayed it enough for your bus to arrive. So we do have one person here. He's the only one, is Brooks, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'd like to open up the testimony. So Brooks, please go ahead. Let's hear your
Did the
opinion.
members of the commission, were you all sent the email I shot over to Julian and to our planning and zoning department?
Yes.
Excellent.
I don't know about
So I
everybody
will
else.
not, you all saw my written thoughts on that issue. I do think, again, this is a great project, especially now that we are going to be getting a crosswalk, which is something that I have been pushing and advocating for since I got onto the council. It's going to be a great job improving the walkability of an area that has not taken it seriously for a long time, to my chagrin. I would like to say on issues of turning left onto Spa, for folks who do use the parking lot at the synagogue, there is, Mr. Chairman, if you will slide down to the synagogue itself, there is a way for you to turn left out of there without causing any traffic issues or violating any rules for people who use the synagogue's parking lot. So that is an option for people if left-hand turns are problematic for them.
Alderman Schandelmeyer makes a good point in that would be an additional reason to use that parking lot if you're thinking about exiting and knowing you're going to.
Hold on a second. We're in the middle of public testimony, man. Hold on. So Mr. Schandelmeyer, we read your letter and we appreciate that and got your comments for the parking lot there. And that's a very good point you state for the left turn in and left turn out. That's easily done by people from that parking lot. I agree with you, which also makes me think it would be easily done up here because it really is effectively one lane. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Schandelmeyer from the commission? All right, thank you, Brooks. You know, you went through a lot to get here from DC, so I appreciate it.
I was at a bus stop for an hour and a half, man.
Yeah, I feel your pain, man. That stinks. Okay.
I took that bus for 20 years, so I feel you. I know your pain.
I will vent about it off the record.
All right, great. All right, so no more public testimony, Julian? Thank you very much. And so, commissioners, we've had all the public testimony for a third meeting on this item, so we will close out the public testimony. None left to be had. And now open to commissioners for any questions more they may have of staff or the applicant, and we can talk it over as commissioners. So as I see it, we got a conundrum here. We've got a barrier that our own DPW would, in vast experience of Sam Bryce's 30 plus years, I presume, he's been around. He says we should have the barrier. We've got traffic engineering that we've paid for, consultants saying, you know, you don't have to have it. And the traffic flow with or without it is roughly similar for that level of service there, but then the level of service effects get transferred elsewhere. And that transfer we're talking about are up here at Pantry 1 or maybe further down Hilltop as you have to go back onto Forest Drive. because all we've effectively done with this new design, as far as the traffic barrier is concerned, is you can go straight rather than having to go right and U-turn up here. So we haven't really gained much, in my opinion, by moving the traffic barrier over a lane or two. The other improvements for, the crosswalk and the sidewalk are fantastic, great gains in my opinion. But the concrete barrier, I would love to see that not go in and give the opportunity of freedom for movement. And then, like Bob maybe suggested, you have a bond secured for later on. And I'm hearing somebody's ringing, so you might want to.
Okay, so if they are not,
mute yourself in the background, whoever that is. So that's kind of what I would maybe want to see. So commissioners, what do you think? It's a big.
Are just a point of process here? Are we done with the public testimony? Are we deliberating? What are we doing?
We are done with public testimony. I mentioned that, and we've moved on to us as commissioners talking about this, and we're amongst ourselves on the item. So yes, public testimony has been closed out.
Well, so I got to say, I've already said this earlier. I think that closing it out is premature because this is all a lot of new stuff, and we haven't given the public really a chance to look at it.
I'm sorry for
However,
rejecting, but you cannot close the public testimony before the next meeting because of the rules of virtual meetings. The public has to be able to see this and comment on it so you can deliberate and vote with the public testimony about those changes.
Hold on a second. If it's a major change to the design, we're just getting back 2 lanes here. I wouldn't think that's major enough. Tom Smith, is that reached the limit that Bill's talking about? And Jackie, Tom and Jackie? Or Chris Beard, our own attorney? I don't believe this meets the reissuance limitation, does it?
I don't think it does. I think you can proceed tonight.
Okay. How about?
I'm just saying that I personally disagree with it because I think that tonight, especially, there's a lot of new stuff. A lot of people are supporting the city and out shopping for Midnight Madness, doing their thing. I personally don't agree with it. However, I understand that it's probably legal.
There are different standards we're talking about.
Hold on, Phil. Hold on, one at a time here. We're talking with our attorney. So, Chris Beard, go ahead.
I mean, technically, I'd like to hear from Tom Smith, but I don't know that he's here because it's a technical issue. Is this a major change, or as Mr. Dale says, that we should have another meeting? I can't hear from him, so I don't know as a finding whether this is or isn't. But the point is well taken by members that, the public should have a chance to consider this new information. So I think you as a body ought to consider the merits of whether this should be, for common sense purposes, and a reasonable chance on the part of the public to consider these changes and weigh in on it. That makes a lot of sense too. So I think it's within your discretion to make a determination on these issues.
And I'm always of the opinion, if more people want to see it and talk about it, to maybe let that happen. But at the same token, we don't want to hamper projects. So Dave, you'd like to see it have more time for the public. Gotcha.
Well, we may not even have any public testimony at all coming in. I'm just trying to err on the side of caution.
Okay. Any other commissioners chime in?
That we should probably do something, but that's just me. That's just one opinion.
Fair enough. Commissioners on that item for keeping public testimony open and holding it over for another meeting?
Well, I guess I'm just a little surprised that there hasn't been more input, especially from the folks in Eastport. I don't know. Maybe they just haven't discovered this, or maybe it's not an issue for them. I don't
think
know,
about it this way.
but
I didn't get the information, the new
Right, until late.
until 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Right.
And I didn't even
Very
get to
late.
look at it until this meeting started.
Okay.
So, and if I'm on the commission, I just saw it. more-
Mr. Chairman?
And we
I
just
think
went
Mr.
over
Dale's-
painful. Is that Chris Beard?
That's
Yeah.
kind of.
Go ahead, Chris.
It is Mr. Dales who's suggesting that you go to another hearing with the
Correct.
information. Am I correct? And
That is correct.
Mr.
That's what
Beard
I'm
is
hearing
right.
from Phil.
That was the plan that we discussed at the last continuance request, was that we would present this at this meeting and leave the record open for public comment until the following meeting for you to deliberate and vote at that meeting.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
and then
you,
we were
Phil,
gonna do
for
a little
putting
bit
that
in the
out
beginning of
there.
the meeting and not take up too much time. I remember
right.
that.
Correct.
Okay, well, I am wrong on that. So we need to thank you, everybody, for getting me on the correct path here. It takes a team. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Dave. So we will, in effect, if the other commissioners don't have any, don't want to chime in, or you can chime in, I think we should keep the public hearing open then for one more time. I personally didn't think it was that huge of a change of design to require another hearing, but hey, I'm open for it. If people want to put it out there, it's good for the public to have more time. What do you commissioners think? Anyone else?
I think, they brought up some new things at this time with regards to the turning. It brought up some new wrinkles as far as this parking lot usage. And there's a lot that I don't agree at all with. I don't think that anybody's going to use that parking lot. I don't think anybody's going to walk to the school from that parking lot ever. And I'd like to see what the public thinks about that.
Someone.
Even with the left turn out of there as a thing, I don't see anybody walking up there. However, maybe they will, and maybe I'm wrong. So I'd like to see what the public thinks about that. That's kind of where I'm standing right now. I never really was concerned that much about the Gentry at all. I was more concerned about Chatham and the other ones.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm for keeping it open now. Sounds like Dave and Alex are, so that's a majority. Bob, last comments?
I don't have strong feelings either way. If the applicant, knowing that they're going to be waiting until February perhaps to get back on the calendar, if it's okay with them, it's okay with me at this point. I would like everybody, though, to take one last look at where the entrance is. What part of our problems may be solved by the further away we can put it from the intersection, the better. And who's got the site map, the new proposal map?
I do. I have it displayed for you.
If you all can just take a look, if the entrance can be placed further to the right so that it goes up the last bay and then crosses over and then comes out as far east as possible. So instead of coming up the middle of the parking lot, it comes up the right-hand side of the parking lot. Take a look at that and see if that also doesn't help, because our discussion about that West Annapolis intersection was interesting. And I learned that the further away further away from the intersections that these entrances can be, the better they are. So take a look at that. You guys are landscape designers, site designers. Take a look at that, see if that makes sense. If it's too close to the house that's on the other side, if it's enough buffering room and so forth, you guys take a look at that. That would be a minor change if it comes in front of us again.
And furthermore on that,
might be an issue.
Well, and furthermore on that it brings it sort of more in line with Mr. Dreeman's comments about, thinking of it as a single stream of traffic. When you're making these turns, think of it as a single stream of traffic versus, crossing 4 lanes. So if you were to move that right to the end of the property line, that does significantly help that, because it puts you sort of back into the main sort of cross section of Hilltop and not into this smack dab in the middle of where it all fans out into 5 lanes.
Right. I see. I understand.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a possibility. Maybe it's not.
This is Annie from Bay. I just want to point out that we did look at that at one point. The entrance
Initially,
was
right?
where you see the last drive aisle that has those like 8 parking spots. Yes, we did have the entrance there at one point, and DPW had a concern that then the parking lot doesn't loop, because we're saving those significant trees at the end of that drive aisle. So there wouldn't be like a loop configuration where you see all these cars lined up to get back out. So that's why the entrance.
Okay, I don't want to go through the specifics of that now, but it sounds like
to the
we looked at
middle.
it I'm going to ask you to take a look at it again. There's no decision being made right now. It's a matter of taking a look at it, and you may be moving that stormwater management thing into the middle and you loop around it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not focusing in on the specifics. You all are paid well to do that. But you're going to have some time to do it in. In the meantime, I will take a look. I've made some notes, and depending on where you guys, where my fellow commissioners vote, there may be some conditions, and I might have just some language that would at least help the conversation move along when we do get back together. So I guess what's happening is that we're proposing to continue this to the first meeting in February. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so.
I think we did it earlier.
Moved to.
I thought when last time we had discussed hearing it today and then doing it at the beginning of the one for Providence Point, and then just getting out of the way. I don't see why Providence Point's, going to take over the next whole meeting.
Well, I beg to differ with you. I think that
that's just my understanding of the last meeting. I don't know, and I think that was Mr. Dale's understanding as well.
I can only tell you that on the basis of talking with Tom Smith, there's a really full meeting planned for the 16th. I mean, it's really planned. And one of the things is to get testimony from Mr. Weingrad in, and he's been he's been crucial to the whole process. And he's not available during January, so it's necessary that he get in. Now, another possibility is moving this thing up actually even faster. I noticed that in the agenda for the combined meeting with the HPC, that they've got some business to perform after this presentation and discussion. I don't know. It sounds to me like this presentation and discussion could take a long time, but that would be the 14th.
Yes, Bob, but that's been advertised as an HPC meeting with a special presentation to the combined. It's not been advertised as a planning commission meeting. Correct. So you can't really continue it to that meeting.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying, but
okay.
And that might have been possible if we had discussed it a week ago. But
I don't need to. Mr. Smith, are you taking a look at the 6th and the 20th of January? Do you think this thing can be wormed in there or not?
Honestly, Chairman Woolman, it depends on how things go on the 16th. How much can we get in of a presentation, any public testimony, as you said, former Senator Weingrad's testimony, and continued public testimony on the 6th. There is a possibility. It sounds like if we're going to deliberate, or the commission is going to deliberate, excuse me, perhaps come up with maybe some additional conditions. It shouldn't take all that long. A half an hour, maybe.
45 minutes, I would think.
Do belittle your time, but
what should
give it an hour
long? Here, this application.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to know what you were referring to. I tend to agree with you at this point. I've heard enough. I know what my mind is. And I would certainly be willing, depending if there are positive votes and it's a basic vote to approve. I mean, I'll do some work on conditions between now and then, but I'm not trying to influence anybody in their votes either way. So when would this come back in? On the 20th of January?
And another limiting factor is, can the developer do what we just asked of them to look at that corner in that amount of time?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Can the applicant? I don't know. What do they say? Phil, you think you guys can, or is that?
Can we be clear? So you're saying to look at the location of the access and try to move it again back to where it was initially?
You're right. Yes.
If that's the ask, and then I would ask both Annie, because that'll affect her work, and Ken, as to, but just for my benefit, we'd be doing that so that we could consider less into the property. Is that correct?
Doing, pardon me?
We'd be moving that access point so that we could consider a left turn in, or just to
no, just to get it further away from the intersection.
Okay.
And then also to get rid of the concrete barrier, in my opinion.
Oh, well,
I don't know. Be a DPW issue.
That's a DPW issue. We can't force them.
Well, I think they were both DPW issues, because I think Annie said that the other one was about the loop as well.
Correct.
Well, I think though that the loop one has more possibility of, we could either address it or tell you why we can't address it, but I think that's worth considering. And so Annie would have to do that analysis, and whether we'll be able to do that ahead of the 16th is a question I have to ask her.
Well, it can't be December 16th. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Waldman, I'm not trying to influence you one way or the other, but I was just repeating what Chairman Sale had said the last meeting, which was that we would present here and then have deliberation at the short beginning of the 16th. That's just what has been said.
I don't know. We got the village.
They were here first, you know. And Tom, go ahead. You got something to say?
Mr. Chairman, if I could add, if we're going to entertain if moving this entrance and perhaps taking the concrete barrier out or shortening it, Public Works needs to reevaluate that in its APF, because right now its APF approval includes this barrier. I want to give them time. And secondly, I would want to have an evaluation of the synagogue parking lot to make sure the 20 spaces they have available doesn't impact their use for their property currently.
Let me propose this. If we're going to be pushing this farther out than December 16th, if that is the will of the commission, my suggestion would be we would take advantage of that time with a work session to include both Planning Commission and DPW. At the last meeting, I said we were amenable to that if the commissioners had changes that they thought merited a work session. At the time, no one indicated that they did, but several ideas were raised here. And if the commissioners feel that that would be necessary and we're going to be getting potentially pushed, then I would want to take advantage of that time to make it worth the applicant's while.
Well, I mean, that's pretty unusual. I mean, usually we leave it up to the applicant and staff generally, planning and Public Works, you know, to work out those issues. I don't know.
Just been proposed.
They're qualified to get into those things. I mean,
that had just been proposed by the chairman and one of the other commissioners, the belief Commissioner Pline, at the last meeting.
Yeah.
To have a work session with DPW?
But with us, with the applicant.
I'm not sure that I'm going to learn that much more. I just want to see what the public has to say. That's all I'm more concerned about at this point. However, I'd be up for work session if that's what you choose to do. If that's what the commission wants to do.
Well, I think if you clarify for us what the task to us is that you'd like us to reconsider, then we'll know if we could do that in before the 16th. And if that task includes consideration of the barrier and therefore DPW and their APF, I think that also affects whether we'd be able to have this considered on the 16th or even the next meeting. So if you could tell us what we'd like us to consider.
It's both. It's moving the entrance back to the original location, roughly south to the east, and also, if that's done, would that then make it so we could get rid of the concrete barrier to lanes, if or not? Those two items.
So Annie and Sam.
But one affects the other.
Annie and Sam could weigh in on whether that could be accomplished before either of the next two dates. To the Planning Commission, you have to tell us which date you're asking about. Is it the 16th or a January meeting?
I would go for the January meeting myself. I'd inject it in the middle of those three. So, because the first meeting we have of that big development is going to be all presentation. And the next one we could throw in this and then go into public comment after that, is my opinion. I'd like to see it that way. That way it gives you enough time as the applicant to go attack this, because it is the holiday season right now. You need a little bit more time. Sounds smart, Phil?
Sure. To Annie and Sam, will that give us enough time to consider those alternatives?
So I mean, for us, we have plenty of time. We're just gonna have to have a meeting with DPW. So it's more of, can DPW meet before then? And we'll go over the old access point.
I think we can meet before then to discuss this.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to put it 2 meetings from now. That'll give everybody holiday time and everything else, Phil.
Yeah.
I really would like, I'd like to do that.
Ben, I think if one of the objectives here is that you want the plans to be available for the public to view, they would need to be submitted. Whatever comes out of this in terms of revised plan would need to be made available, not the day of the meeting, whatever that date might be, but
2 weeks prior.
in advance of it. And there needs to be some mechanism for letting the public know that there are revised plans also. So
Right.
that
So we're
needs
talking
to
2 weeks.
take place.
lead time. Yeah, think about that, Phil, 2 weeks. So it may even be a third meeting. Why don't we go with 2 meetings from now? And if we find out that it needs to be pushed, we'll push it to that third one.
That's acceptable.
Well, if you're going to continue it, you need to continue it. We've talked up to a specific date.
We'll
Jackie, what
continue
is
it
the
to
date
2
for
meetings
the-
from now, and
So-
with the possibility of moving it even further.
Okay, so
That date is January 6th.
6th, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Mr. Dales, stuff has to get in a week before January 6th, okay?
I'm really thinking mid-January. I'm really mid-January, let's be honest.
Because of the holidays, I would tend to agree.
Yeah,
Okay,
not
the 20th.
January 6th. That's
Okay, then you have to get stuff in at least a week or 10 days before that meeting, because,
Understood, Commissioner.
okay?
Understood.
All right.
all right. So Jackie, let's continue it to the
20th
second
of
meeting in
January.
January.
You also need to reopen the public hearing that you just closed.
I will make sure that is known. I'll make sure that is known. So if we
You just
we'll
need to
push
make a motion to reopen it and then continue it to January 20th.
Gotcha. Thank you. So
You're
before
welcome.
we do that, middle January, I got Phil's head nod on that. Yeah.
Yes.
Good. And everybody else. All right. So I'd close the public hearing on this item a little bit premature. And thank you for everyone for correcting me on that and making it right. That's good. We're making it better for the public. We'll get more comment and things will get better so we can get this plan moving forward towards an approval possibility. So I would like to make a motion that we reopen the public opinion session and also with that motion, I'll make that one motion, then we'll second the continuance of it. So that's my motion to open the public opinion back up for this. Can I get a second?
Public session, I'll second it.
Thank you, Dave. Any discussion? All
Aye.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the public opinions on this item will still remain open. So this item is still open. Therefore, not hearing any more comments that really need to be made towards it tonight due to the late hour, we will continue this item to the mid-January meeting of the Planning Commission. And if items arise of busyness, like with any item, the applicant can always talk to us and we can modify things and get notice to the public in time. So we will, I will continue this to the mid-meeting in January. Any commissioners have any issue with that?
That's January 20th, okay.
Could I add to the request? Do we get the Board of Appeals language? Like when you submit anything new or anything?
You should we should be able to distribute the Board of Appeals opinion in the next couple of days. It was
Thank you.
circulated today, the draft opinion for final signature. So
that's
that usually takes a couple of days. And when we have it, we will immediately forward it to you all.
Right, so that's staff's responsibility. Thank you.
Yes, that would be staff's responsibility.
Thank you.
All right. So we will continue this item. Before we stop any further comments, commissioners, any last minute comments on the item or questions for process and what to expect? And also I'll give Phil a last chance. Commissioner?
I'll just say, I just want to say, Phil, you've got a task ahead of you, and I appreciate the work that you've been trying to work with us on this. And we're just trying to cross our T's and dot our I's and see what we can do to make this work if we can.
Thank you. My only comment would be similar in that, the applicant has been noted, has been amenable to every request and tried to address every concern and will continue to do so. And I appreciate the Planning Commission expressing their views and asking the questions that you've asked of all the experts today, because I think that will be helpful to the applicant and DPW as we now come together and try to come up with the best possible solution between now and our next hearing. I'm very hopeful that, between the two suggestions and all the comments heard today, that our traffic concepts consultants and DPW can come up with a further compromise beyond even what we're showing here. And we'll come back to you with that.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that. Very professional. All right, commissioners, we're now going to continue this item, and members of the public, this item will be continued to our mid-January Planning Commission hearing, which I believe is January 20th, I heard. I'm not looking at a calendar, but I believe that's correct. And public opinion will remain open. The public can comment to the Planning and Zoning Department. And I strongly encourage the public, you might want to wait till we get that 2 weeks prior information on what the new stuff is, so you can add that into your comments for members of the public. So be looking for that online. It'll be posted in eTrack along with this application number, which is referenced on the agendas. So on the Planning Zoning website, Planning Commissions, and then you'll see this agenda item, and it'll have the eTrack number link. Go to it. The link doesn't work, open up eTrack from the link on the web page, and then enter in the eTrack number. It's kind of technical, but it is out there. And also during our meeting, the applicant will present the changes. So if you're a member of the public and you can't get that info, it will be presented during the meeting. And that also brings to mind, Tom, if we have significant changes, would we need to have another public session for 2 weeks for the public to comment on all the new stuff? And Jackie, I believe that's the case. Yes? No?
Well, I think that really at this point it would be a decision of the commission.
Yeah.
If you wanted to hold it open beyond January 20th. And I think you can't make that decision until you see what's submitted, because there have been a number of possibilities talked about. It could wind up that you come back with the same plan.
Yeah, and I
But
honestly,
I think we've had all the possibilities addressed already. We've had a lot of the possibilities addressed already. So therefore, I don't think, unless it's something drastic like a bridge going across the road, I don't think we're going to need to have another day.
Right. There's nothing that requires you to leave it open again after you see the changes on January 20th. That's really a policy decision you all have made about the conduct of public hearings.
All right, thank you. There's no obelisk going up at the intersection that we don't know of. Fantastic. All right, I got a smile out of Phil. Look at that. All right, anyone last minute questions from staff? All right, this item remains continued to the January 20th ish meeting unless we hear other from the applicant that they run into problems. And I want to thank the applicant for the changes, the wonderful changes on the bike path continuation, the crosswalk and other things. There's some fantastic improvements in there that we've talked about, commission, and come to conclusion. As hopefully we can finalize this with getting everything else solidified in our brains for what's best for the public and the applicant and everyone involved. So thank you, everyone. No hard feelings. It's all business we're doing here. So that's all I have on the item, and it's gone off on the agenda to the next.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. And I'll start the sharing of the agenda if I can get it back here. And we're going into the last item on our agenda is actually what we kind of already talked about earlier with Jackie, which was unfinished business and the notification presentation for the city dock December 14th and the HPC. We already talked about that being on a Tuesday just before our next meeting. So we're going to have 2 meetings in the same week, and I hope everybody's aware of that. We're going to make you aware of it again. There it is, December 14th. Jackie, anything to add?
No, it's the first item on the agenda of that meeting. So,
And that's that's going to be at 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m. I sent you all the agenda. I emailed the agenda to you today with the mark the calendars email.
Okay.
And you'll get a Zoom invite, but the Zoom invite will be coming from where I think Sherry has emailed to Mark or Julian all the people, the names of all the planning commissioners and everybody who will be at that meeting. So. And Mr. Smith, I think, is also planning on attending, as well as Mr. Malinoff.
All right, wonderful. I have a question for our legal counsel if they're still online here. Chris, you still around? Got to zoom out here. I can't tell who's in.
I'm here.
Okay. I don't know if it'd be appropriate now on unfinished business that we have a little bit of time. I want to ask you real quick, and whether it's right to do it now or you do it in a closed session like the some other public entities do, is what is the power of the commission delineated with respect to what we've been having issued today? You got Department of Public Works saying one thing, the city saying one thing about an item, and then we're kind of disagreeing and maybe thinking it doesn't fit into the comp plan. Where are we in that power struggle there, where you have the city may say one thing about a project and they have authority to make their assessment, whereas we may, find different testimony from someone else or maybe our own views and want to disagree with that and actually make a change? Are we within our legal ability to do that?
I think you are, as long as you can find the substantial authority for your position. And particularly sorting out conflicts between a consultant and an expert, you're going to have to make a finding. So I think you have the discretion and the code to do that.
Well, may I just interject that those conditions that Public Works is recommending, they're not just, normal comments. They were part of the mitigation plan that they have signed off on for the adequate public facilities, and which makes that binding. What's in the APF is binding on the city. So they would actually have to agree to, make modifications to the mitigation plan. So each one of the mitigation plans from each department is signed by the director of that department. They're a little bit, it's a little bit, kind of a higher level of a it's not really just a recommendation, it becomes a requirement if it's part of the mitigation plan. We haven't encountered this issue.
They, who do you mean they?
Where?
The city, or do you mean the applicant when you said they?
I mean, the APF ordinance requires different departments to evaluate projects for compliance with certain standards that are outlined in Title 22. And then part of that approval process may be that they say, well, it doesn't really meet the standards, but we can do this mitigation plan. And with this mitigation plan, we can make a determination that it meets our standards. And that's what's happened with this one. They've included, if you look at that new memo you got from Public Works that I guess came today, that was distributed today in one of Tom's attachments, you'll see on the last page it says mitigation plan. So they're going to have to convince Public Works to modify the mitigation plan. It's a technical thing.
This is Joel Braithwaite from Office of Law. I'm not sure that there's precedent for after two parties have a binding contract and they have agreed that this is what the terms of the contract is, to change the contract without changing the terms of consideration. I'm not sure how these things will play together. This is certainly a case of first impression. To renegotiate a mitigation plan causes me some consternation, but I guess we'll cross the bridge when we come to it.
All right. Well, I guess I would, Joel, I think Joel's absolutely right about that. But what I was hearing was that there was things being suggested that might change the terms, the basics, like moving the intersection or doing this or that there might be a possibility of modifying the mitigation plan based on these other changes.
Yeah, but we do that with we've done that with so many other applications that have come through over the last 10 years.
Right.
So that's, I think, the precedent's there. Moving entrances, moving parking lots from one side of development to the other, moving drainage. I mean, we've done that. So
true, but in this particular case, there is a contractual agreement that is incorporated into the APF approval that is required in order for a project to come before the Planning Commission. And And that's that, now that I guess this is amended from the original approved mitigation agreement. Tom, is that correct? The one you sent today is a revision of something else?
That's a revision from the original APF approval.
Right, so they've already revised it once, so I think we've pretty much internally agreed that we're not bringing any more projects to Planning Commission that don't have final APF approval.
Well,
based on this experience.
Did have
So,
APF approval when we brought it to the commission, and the plans were revised and it was reevaluated.
right.
But I would
The
have
question
to.
really is, can we tell Department of Public Works to do one thing or another? That's the
Okay.
question.
This is Joel Braven from Office of Law. That is where my concerns are.
Yeah,
Because then you're substituting the expertise of the director for another expertise, and the code wouldn't allow for such an, especially since the Board of Appeals has the jurisdiction over APF.
Well, no. It's because I don't think we have the authority over the Department of Public Works.
I guarantee
I'd
you
have to
don't.
go look at the code and what sets the commission up. I think we only have authority over the Department of Planning and Zoning. I don't think we can tell the Department of Finance to raise taxes.
I don't think we can either, but we have authority over the project coming through us and being thrown up the chain.
Well,
Go ahead, Tom.
I want to ask that question where what Mr. Wallman just said, authority over public works or planning and zoning, when there are multiple agencies who are involved in APF, be it public works, fire, police, zoning, recreation and parks, that have to all have their own standards within APF. So if you're saying you don't have authority more than one agency, I would make that for all the agencies when it comes to those APF standards. You may be able to exercise your authority over a site design standard or a plan development standard or a special exception standard, but I think APF is a different level of standard. Joel, jump in here.
I'm inclined to agree, and that's why it's under the jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals.
What? Why do they have jurisdiction over APF?
Because that's how the city code was written.
Wait a minute, Joel. What if an application doesn't even go before the Board of Appeals? It only comes before the Planning Commission.
I'm not sure about that, Joel.
We have to turn a blind eye to APF issues?
No, APF is under the jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals because the statute provides that. So we didn't even have to ever have APF. So now that we do have APF and we said that APF belongs to the Board of Appeals, I'm not seeing how APF could come within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to change a properly decided or negotiated plan. Now, this is contract law is what we're talking about. This is not, I'm not talking, so there's planning issues and then there's
administrative
contract.
law.
Well, in administrative law, no, you're limited to your jurisdiction. And if your jurisdictional statute does not provide for that process, I'm not sure how you can weigh in on that process.
Right, okay, I don't know that I'm not sure, okay. I'd have to go read the damn Annapolis City Code again to see where we're authorized. But I would be very surprised if in an application where there's fire, police, DPW, and whomever APF decisions made, that we can't, that we can, I don't know what we can't tell them that they're wrong. But we certainly can look into how it was done. I mean, that's what the Board of Appeals started 2 years ago. They started to look into APF standards and they found all kinds of funny things going on. And so when we get applications, we get APF reports. You're telling me that we couldn't look into those standards?
No,
department people to question?
My comments are very specific. A mitigation plan is not, it's a plan that the code requires if and only if the director of the agency believes that the project can meet APF with a mitigation plan. So the mitigation plan is to prevent
those conditions.
Say again?
I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you were finished. Pardon me.
Okay, no, so with respect to the mitigation plans are a contract that is subject to review under the Board of Appeals and eventually at the court, at the circuit court. I'm not sure that any board can go and revisit a contract the city entered into and say anything about a contract that the city entered into, but for it be within that commission.
Well,
So that's the issue that I
don't want to
have.
take up I don't want to take up everybody's time here, but you know, they decide that they're going to, you know, do something, and DPW agrees, and they say, okay, you're going to have to pay us a certain amount, or this is the mitigation that you're going to have to go through. The matter comes before the Planning Commission or the Board of Appeals, and they say, no. It's got to be over there. And that's the condition of approval. Okay, the applicant goes back to the Department of Public Works and says, look, they say it's got to be over there. So there's a new mitigation plan that's drawn up. It's not that we're violating, you know, their previous contract. Otherwise, they'd be binding our hands, and that
We've done it
clearly
numerous
can't happen.
times.
That can't happen. But the question is whether we can tell the Department of Public Works that that concrete divider can or can't go in, or where it's supposed to go in or not. And I don't know that we can do that.
How is that any different from telling the Department of Public Works that they can or cannot enter a contract with the applicant over what meets adequate public safety facilities, rather?
I have to think about that.
As at that point, you're executive and you're trying to direct the process of an executive branch. The authority which you're acting upon is from the city council. The city council delegated a zoning authority to the board, to this commission, rather. So you're acting under the city council's authority. The city council can't go to the director of public works and tell him what type of agreements that he can enter into, or tell any other executive branch official what type of agreements they can enter into. So this is about separation of powers in the very Constitution of the United States, less about how we operate our government.
I strongly believe we have to.
Okay.
I strongly believe we have the power, but
Joel, you and I need to go to lunch on this one. I don't wanna
Absolutely,
take up
I'll be happy to
everybody's
discuss
time,
it further.
I really need to hear you, and you need to hear me.
how about we give all these lawyers time to think about it, and I'll call some people and talk back to you guys in another couple of days, next week, when we've had time to think about it. But my basic.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll second that motion.
Joel, I'll split it with you. How's that?
Absolutely, Mr. Wallman, anytime.
Great.
All three of us go.
All right.
Yes.
All right, hey, we need that
Yes.
man in the right-hand corner.
All right.
I'll sit this one out. You lawyers go have at it.
Yeah, go have at it. And we have a lot more power than you think here, I think. But anyway, all right, we've had a motion, a second. All those in favor of closing the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful work, everyone. This
Great.
meeting
Good
is.
night, everybody.